stand here for Antony Tudor with joy, because in our profession, we believe he's one of the rare few who is permanent, that is immortal. His work will last. It's a risky word to use about dancing. Dancing's writ on the air. I met him when we were both 24. He was young, bonny, hopeful, and very bewildered. British ballet was in its infancy. It was brought into being by two women, Ninette de Valois, who started a company that was to become the Royal Ballet, and Marie Rambert, who was Polish. Everybody called her Mim. She married an English playwright, Ashley Dukes, and together they bought a church hall and turned it into a theater, home of the Ballet Rambert. She had an uncanny ability to perceive talent. She discovered Britain's two great choreographers, Frederick Ashton and Antony Tudor.
I was rang up by somebody, a young man, calling himself Antony Tudor, who asked for an interview. So I said, well, there is a class in the afternoon at 3. And he said, no, I'm afraid I'm not finished with my work until 4 or something. I said, but what is your work? And he said, I'm an accountant in a butcher's shop.
My father used to like the music hall, and I think he liked the chorus girls. And so he frequently took us to one of the London music halls. And I was obviously entranced because I remember little songs from it, almost. Then, yeah, follow the footsteps in the snow, so on.
In a very short while, perhaps after 6 months of study, he told me that he would like to do a ballet. And I said, but Antony, but you can't dance yet. He said, yes, but I feel I have an idea and I would like somebody else to dance it.
He did 4 or 5 ballets, which weren't very good, although in all of them the movement was original. They were performed in Rambert's tiny theater.
That was the most wonderful, hard school for my choreographers, to try and to use every inch of space to a purpose. The artists themselves had to be absolutely sincere, because the audience was so near, one would feel any falsehood. So that all this poverty, I always call it our blessed poverty, really, because of that, we learned so much.
In 1936, Rambert presented a new ballet by Tudor, Jardin aux Lilas, Lilac Garden. And I was in America at that time, but an English friend wrote me and said, this is the future. And if England can do things like this, we're in for a renaissance, a big renaissance. What he did, which was brand new then, he put them in the clothes of his mother's time, the Edwardian clothes. That made the people real. They were the people we knew. Tudor used movement and gesture to externalize the thoughts and feelings of his characters. The role of the bride-to-be was choreographed for Maude Lloyd.
He set the scene completely in the opening passage, and she has her arm behind her back. And the first movement he asked me to do was to just slide my hand slowly down my arm and feel the tension. He chose a role which was entirely suited to himself. The man she must marry.
Well, he's a bossy sort of character. If he turns his head, it's almost with a disapproval of anything that's going on around him. And if he looks at her, it's because she belongs to him. And if he takes her, it's a possessive hand.
Tudor made stillness as meaningful as motion.
She realizes that she's never going to see her lover again, and she faints back into her husband-to-be's arms. And then he has this marvelous moment when the music plays and nothing happens, except that she comes to life and she moves slowly round the group of people who are around her. And when she gets to her lover, there's a slight movement in her shoulders and she moves back. And this is all done, obviously, only in her mind.
I was at the Rambert Theatre when it formed, when the Rambert Ballet formed. And about the second or third year we were there, Agnes came and she wanted a small theatre in which to show herself as a recitalist.
I was taken into the theatre just to say hello to Mim and so forth, and two young men were painting some scenery on the floor, and they were Hugh Lane and Antony Tudor. Tudor and I got very close those first few years. Tudor and Lane and I were a threesome, and we had a marvelous time together in London. Hugh Lang was an extremely beautiful young man. It was Narcissus. And he had come to London to study art. And he saw Antony and fell in love and just attached himself. And he was like the pilot fish. Antony was kind of vague about things and drifted. He didn't know what direction he was going in. And Hugh was absolutely needle sharp. And Antony, at the end of his life, said, I just couldn't have amounted to anything without you. He was my discipline. When we did Kindertotenlieder, Dark Elegies, I was in the first performance.
But of course the original interpreters always have the edge because they're there when the movement comes to me and they're in the studio, and so they join in the discovery. Maude was beautiful in the pas de deux. The fourth dance was made for Agnes de Mille. Agnes is something beyond words.
As I saw the ballet unfold, I thought it was supreme. I thought it was much more important than Chardin. I thought this was a breakthrough, a real breakthrough in the art of choreography. His use of music was extremely subtle. He danced the phrases, he danced the larger patterns. He did not ever dance the rhythm. Antony's work is never counted out. It's just you move on the impulse. It's like water.
He tried to find, it seemed to me, the essence of what the music was saying to him, more than the beat. I knew that it was called Kindertotenlieder. They thought it was some terrible tragedy that had happened to this little group of people. But that was as far as I knew. And when he was writing the pas de deux, he and I went down into a small studio. He couldn't see what I was doing. I couldn't see what he was doing. We had no mirror. And yet it was one of the most beautiful pas de deux he's ever written.
Dark Elegies in 1937 was Tudor's last ballet for Rambert. I went home in 1938. I'd been here picking up the pieces and making myself an American career now. And then Lucia Chase, an heiress, wanted to found a company, and she said, we want to bring over Frederick Ashton. And I said, well, that's a good idea, but I don't think he'll stay, because he's tied very closely in with Ninette de Valois and the Sadler's Wells Ballet. Bring Antony Tudor. She said, who's that? This was in July. He didn't answer until late in September, when Germany had marched into Poland. And England now was at war. And Antony then decided he would answer. And he said, yes, I'll come. The new company became American Ballet Theatre. Jardin aux Lilas and Dark Elegies were both performed in its first season in 1940. New York was rocked by Lilac Garden because it was so beautiful, so poignant, and so freshly new. This was as new as Martha Graham, but not at all like him. This was poetic, Prussian. Tudor had a big period when he first came to America. He produced one ballet a year, and they were fine. They were wonderful, quite a few of them. And then he stopped producing them.
With Antony, it was always an agony. It really was. You could see him suffering to pull out what he wanted. And this is, I think, because he wasn't influenced by anybody else. It had to come from inside himself.
I've probably made 10% of the ballets that any other choreographer's done. if 10%. But I wanted each one to be different from anything else I'd done. I never wanted to be said that I'm repeating myself in something.
Great talent has the instinct to protect itself against neurosis, against the inclinations to self-destruct, except in 2 cases that I've known in my life. One was Antony Tudor. In the case of Tudor, he achieved very much, but it just dried up, or seemed to, or dispersed. And I cannot answer why. But it's tragic. We've all lost by it. Tudor died in 1987, but his ballets will live. He expressed emotions in dance that he would never let himself express as a man. Dark Elegies is a portrayal of human grief. The actual format is very simple. It's a ritual of peasants just getting together and each recounting the life and loss of a beloved child. He understood something about grief, and he realized the majesty of grief and the kinship of people who felt grief, which is another layer of grief. Oh, yes, he says, I'm a cold-blooded son of a bitch. I am, but my characters never are. And we add, they are the most truthful and searching in all the ballet world.